It was a crisp spring morning at Maxwell Air Force Base, and the mess hall hummed with quiet anticipation. Word had spread quickly. President Donald Trump was making an unannounced visit. No cameras, no reporters, just him and the troops. It was rare, almost unheard of, for a president to drop in like this. Cadet First Class Isa Hartley, 22, sat alone at a corner table, her untouched breakfast cooling in front of her. Despite the buzz in the room, her appetite was gone. Known among her peers as Iron Wings for her flawless flight simulations, Isa had been anything but steady this week. Her thoughts were far away. Sergeant Dawson, the gruff but kind mess hall supervisor, slowed as he passed her table, raising an eyebrow at the full tray. "You good, cadet?" Isa forced a small smile. "Just not hungry, sir." Outside, the base siren announced the arrival of a visiting dignitary. Chairs scraped softly as everyone stood straighter. Isa rose too, pressing her lips together. President Trump stepped through. The doors wearing a simple windbreaker instead of a suit. He smiled easily. "At ease," he said. Applause rippled through the hall. Phones came out briefly, then lowered. Trump's gaze moved slowly across the room, not searching for praise, but for something else. And then he saw it, one empty tray. As he walked the line, he shook hands and asked light questions. "Where you from? How's the food? Who's got the best aim?" Laughter followed him until he stopped at Isa's table. He glanced at the tray, then at her. "You didn't eat?" he asked, his voice calm. Isa straightened quickly. "Sir, no. I wasn't hungry." "A full mess hall," he said gently, "and one empty tray. That usually means something." The room grew quiet. "What's your name?" "Cadet Isa Hartley, sir." He nodded, then surprised everyone by pulling out the chair across from her. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" You could have heard a pin drop. "Permission granted, sir." Isa murmured, unsure what else to say. Trump folded his arms and leaned forward slightly. "You've got the eyes of someone carrying something heavy." "You don't have to talk, but I've learned that a tray can tell a story." Isa's hands trembled. She stared at the table before finally whispering, "It's been a rough week." "Sir, I'm listening." Something about his presence didn't feel political. It felt human. "My dad had a stroke last week," she said quietly. "He's in a hospital in Montana. He always dreamed I'd serve in the Air Force. Said it was in our blood. But I wasn't approved for emergency leave. I'm too close to graduation. One mistake and I lose everything." Trump's expression changed, not dramatic, just attentive. "I call the hospital between classes," she continued. "Yesterday. The nurse told me he didn't recognize my voice." Her breath caught. "That's why I couldn't eat." Trump leaned back, his voice softening. "I've met kings and presidents," he said, "but I've also stood with parents holding folded flags. Sometimes the strongest people in the room are the ones no one notices." He nodded toward the tray. "An empty tray isn't weakness? It's someone still showing up with a storm inside." Tears welled in Isa's eyes. "Thank you, sir." Trump turned to Sergeant Dawson. "Who's the commanding officer here?" "Colonel Pierce, sir." "Command wing." "Good, I'll speak with him." He stood, resting a hand briefly on Isa's shoulder. "Hang in there. I've moved bigger things for less." Then, with a faint smile, "And next time you skip a meal, make it for something less painful." Soft laughter eased the tension within. The hour Colonel Pierce was summoned. No press, no announcements, just a conversation. "Colonel," Trump said, "I met a cadet with a father on the edge of life who can't go see him." "Sir," Pierce replied, "regulations?" "I understand regulations," Trump said calmly, "but leadership leaves room for humanity." He paused. "If she were your daughter, would you stop her from saying goodbye?" Pierce exhaled. "No, sir." "Then do the right thing," Trump said, quietly. That evening, a knock came at Isa's dorm door. A senior officer handed her a sealed envelope. "Cadet Hartley, you are hereby granted 72 hours of compassionate leave, a military escort will transport you home. Uniform not required." At the bottom, handwritten in marker. "Don't forget to eat." Isa laughed through tears. Hours later, she boarded a small government plane. As the sun rose above the clouds, she whispered, "Dad, I'm coming." At the hospital, she took his hand and spoke softly. His fingers twitched. His eyes opened. "Isa," he rasped. "I'm here." Tears fell on both sides. Back at Maxwell, Trump returned to the mess hall. He stopped at Isa's old table, still empty. "She made it," Sergeant Dawson said quietly. "Her dad recognized her." Trump nodded. "Good." He sat down and ate. Soon other cadets joined him. No rank, no speeches. Just shared stories, because sometimes leadership isn't about standing above everyone else. Sometimes it's about sitting down and listening. Days later, Isa returned to base with her father's blessing and a quiet clarity she hadn't felt before. She entered the mess hall without drawing attention and paused at her old table. Sergeant Dawson noticed immediately and grinned. "Good to have you back." This time, Isa filled her tray without hesitation: mac and cheese, cornbread, chocolate milk. She sat down, then pulled a folded envelope from her pocket and handed it to him. "Could you make sure this gets to the president?" Dawson nodded. "You bet." Inside the envelope was a simple handwritten note. "Mr. President, my tray may have been empty, but my heart was full the day you sat with me. My father held my hand. He knew who I was. You made that happen. Thank you for seeing the person, not just the uniform. With gratitude, Cadet Isa Hartley." The letter moved quietly through official channels until it reached Trump's desk. He read it in silence, then slipped it into a folder labeled "Personal Keep." Later that day, a memo went out to the Department of Defense. Effective immediately, base commanders are granted discretion to approve emergency leave for cadets experiencing significant emotional or family hardship. At the commander's judgment, it soon became known as the Hartley Directive, a subtle but powerful shift across bases nationwide. Commanders began paying closer attention to untouched meals, to tired eyes, to cadets who spoke less than usual. One empty tray had told a story, and that story changed others. A few weeks later, a photograph appeared quietly on the Air Force Academy bulletin board. Isa stood in her flight uniform beside her father, who wore a hospital gown. They were smiling, hands clasped. There was no watermark, no press release, just a caption written in blue ink. "She made it home." Someone snapped a photo of the board and shared it online. "One empty tray, one full heart. Isa Hartley, silent hero." The post spread quickly. Veterans, cadets, parents, nurses each added their own stories beneath it. Trump reposted it with 3 words: "She inspired us all." For Isa, it was never about attention. It was about love and the weight of duty. But for the rest of the world, it was a reminder. Sometimes the most powerful stories begin in silence. Isa returned to her routine, but she was different now, steadier, stronger. One morning, she was called to the commander's office. Nervous, she straightened her uniform. Colonel Pierce greeted her with an unexpected smile. "Cadet Hartley, you're on breakfast duty. Now?" She blinked. "Sir?" He gestured toward a side room. Inside sat President Trump, 2 trays already filled. "I owe you a breakfast," he said. Isa laughed softly. "Yes, sir, I believe you do." They ate without ceremony. Trump asked about her father's recovery, her plans after graduation, and why she chose to serve. "Because someone has to protect the skies for the ones who can't," she said. Trump nodded. "I'd trust you with mine." When they finished, he slid a small box across the table. Inside was a simple pin and eagle in flight, etched with one word. Isa wore it beneath her uniform. Close to her heart. Days passed, and the base settled back into routine, but something had shifted. Cadets talked more, listened more, looked out for one another. One evening in the dorm, Isa found Cadet Leo Mills sitting alone, staring at an untouched dinner tray. "Everything okay, Leo?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just found out my brother's cancer came back." Isa didn't offer advice. She didn't ask questions. She sat down beside him and pushed her own tray away. They sat together in silence, 2 empty trays, 2 heavy hearts. Later, Isa wrote in her journal, "It's not about fixing everything. Sometimes it's about not letting someone sit alone." Back in Montana, her father slowly recovered. Speech therapy helped. Strength returned bit by bit. One morning, hands still trembling, he wrote a letter and mailed it to Washington. "Dear President Trump, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. You brought my daughter home. I raised her to believe in duty. I never imagined duty would keep her from me. You saw her. That's what real leadership does. Thank you from a grateful dad. The letter was framed and hung quietly in the West Wing. Months later, Isa stood among the top graduates of her class. Cadet First Class Isa Hartley, distinguished graduate. She stepped forward, spine straight, eyes clear. Colonel Pierce pinned the honor to her uniform and whispered, "You taught this base more than we taught you." At the edge of the crowd stood her father, now in a wheelchair, tears rolling down his cheeks. Beside him, Trump applauded proudly. "You did it, baby girl," her father said, hugging her tightly. Trump smiled. "Think you'll be flying Air Force One someday?" Isa grinned. "Sir, I've got bigger dreams." That night, Trump gave an unscheduled speech at the Academy banquet. No teleprompter. Just a single page. "I met a cadet this year who taught me something," he said. "She reminded me that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it sits alone with an empty tray and shows up anyway." He glanced toward Isa. "We talk about strength in flight and command, but don't forget the strength in empathy and listening and seeing what others miss." Applause filled the room. But for Isa, the loudest sound was the steady beat of her own heart. The mess hall later gained a new addition above Isa's old table. In honor of Cadet Isa Hartley, who taught us the power of one empty tray. Beneath it hung a polished silver tray, unused. Cadets paused there every day. Some nodded. Some left notes, tokens, folded scraps of paper. It became more than a tribute. It became a reminder. Look for the unseen. Ask about the quiet. Respect the weight others carry. Isa never ate alone again. Years later, a nervous 17-year-old named Amaya Benson entered the mess hall for the first time. She spotted the plaque. Read the words and smiled. She sat beneath it. Upperclassmen joined her. "You know the story?" one asked. Amaya shook her head. "Girl sat here once," the cadet said. "Tray empty, heart full, changed everything." Amaya didn't understand yet, but she would that night. She wrote, "One day I want to be like her, now a decorated pilot." Captain Isa Hartley flew missions across distant skies carrying wounded soldiers home. Delivering aid, training the next generation, she still wore the pin on one mission. She pushed hard to fly a young soldier back to his dying mother. Later, her commander found a note on his desk. "Sometimes a tray tells the whole story. Make room for one more." Captain Isa Hartley at a veteran ceremony years later. An older Trump stepped onto the stage. "Captain Isa Hartley," he announced. "I once saw her eat nothing, but she fed everyone with her strength." Isa accepted the medal, standing tall. "You once said I looked like someone carrying something heavy." She said, "You helped me carry it and taught me how to lift others." Trump nodded, eyes misted. Somewhere in the crowd, a cadet whispered, "That's her, the one with the empty tray." But now her tray and her life were full.